Okay. Call to order.
Matthews,
Here.
Madsen, O'Neill, Stevens,
Here.
Fickner,
Here.
Seahorn,
Here.
Richter.
Here.
We have a quorum.
And at this time, I'd like to introduce Brother Mark Gwynn from Loving Love Christian Fellowship Church to lead us in an invocation. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we count it a great privilege as citizens to be able to come together and participate in our government. And Father, in obedience to your word, we do pray for all those that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. And Father, we want to be careful to not lean to our own understanding, but in all our ways to acknowledge you and trust you to direct our paths. And so, Father, tonight we pray that you would direct the business of this meeting. We pray, Father, that our discourse this evening would be civil and with respect. And Father, also that it would be fruitful, that it would accomplish what is needed. We pray, Father, for the blessings upon our city, the prosperity of our city, even as our soul prospers. So, Father, we pray for financial blessings, but even more importantly, we pray, Father, for the spiritual health of our city. We thank you, Father, for this meeting. We just pray that you would superintend over everything that is done and said tonight. May it bring glory and honor to you. In Jesus' precious and wonderful name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, sir. Join me in the flag salute. Attention, salute, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Item number 1, citizen participation. When I call your name, would you please approach the podium, state your name, and we'll get underway. As always, there's a 3-minute limit per person, 12-minute limit per topic. And first up is Ms. Cindy Berger.
Hey everyone. So first I have a question and a request. I would like to request if there is a schedule for the street sweeper to come out. I've waited like a few months to get my street clean. I've been parking off the road, making sure that there's access. And then over the weekend, a bunch of teenagers come over to spend the night with my teenagers because it's spring break. We've got cars parked in the front and the street sweeper shows up this morning. So I still have the little spiky balls out in front of my yard. The couple things I want to mention that I think you guys will answer when these items come up on the consent agenda. I think I would like a brief explanation of what the maintenance bonds are. I don't know. I don't know what that is, or just maybe something if we've been talked about before where I could look it up. And also on the agreement with South Central Industries, will this include cleanup areas like outside where trash has been overtaken, like in some of the areas where there's been camps found? And then also on number 8 item, that I was wondering what the permit in lieu of franchise was and what service they're providing to the school. And then on number 12, I will say I personally think that OK and Homelessness is a good nonprofit. However, I am in disagreement with this agreement, and I'd like to explain why. It talks about using community development block grant. And that grant is meant for people that live in Shawnee. If you live in your house for 1 year, you own your house outright, and you are low income, you can apply for this grant and get up to $30,000 worth of home repairs. I don't think very many people in our city know about this grant, because now if we give it to, once again, we're giving a building, it looks like, to another nonprofit where they don't have to pay any taxes on, which it just takes more money away from our community. And then also using this grant is going to attract additional homeless people for this transitional housing. We have people living in houses that are just one call away from being condemned, And now those people are gonna be homeless if that happens, and they can't apply for this program anymore if the funds are tied up in helping with homeless services, which is more than just losing your house. Homeless services include drugs, they include mental health issues, and a whole bunch of other issues that cannot be solved by just housing people. And so I think if we take away any money from the city for community development block grant, all that's gonna do is create more homeless from people who already live here. So please prioritize that block grant and get it out, get the word out. People don't know about it. And I think there's a lot of people that would qualify that live here. I see houses all over. I live next door to a house that's been empty for a couple years. Maybe if we could tighten down on some of the slumlords and have them do inspections every year. Thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Glenn Peck.
Your Honor, and other distinguished and accountable representatives, it is good to be with you once more. I've been out of action for a while, and to use a military term, I was overcome by events. But I thank to be here tonight. I want to make a comment, and it is somewhat situated with the previous speaker. As you know, Shawnee has gone through quite a bit of problems, helps, no helps, condemnations, people not knowing the truth. But I want to tell you some good news. For whatever reason, some previous leadership of this city made it impossible for people who lived on the street to go inside the Salvation Army to have meals. They had some metal tables outside. Rain, snow, sleet, none of that mattered. I thank you, and those that had a hand in it. That is stopped. They're able to go inside for their evening meal. And finally, I would say that I know from firsthand experience of a person who has shared this with me, there was a bit of a hiatus as to the worship services at the Salvation Army. If you know anything about the Salvation Army, it's about salvation. And the people now have services as they have had for quite some time. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to address you. And I also want to urge you to continue to do what God would lead you to do. I discussed ever so briefly with our mayor about our agenda tonight. And I looked at it briefly and I said, Your Honor, this looks like it's so packed, it's going to be hard for anybody to lead in silent prayer. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Glenn. Next up, we have Mr. Mark Stewart.
Hello.
Nope.
Tonight I'm focusing on the current contract that we have with the company of Dunnington Latham Consulting for bill monitoring from the Oklahoma State government. This contract was tabled until January, partly because of my friend Teresa Cody, and I thank her for that. In January, there were a few questions before almost voting it down. It was almost voted down until one commissioner vehemently objected to it and was voted for with the legal understanding that it could be canceled within 45 days. This company's responsibility is to track current bills in the Oklahoma legislature. This is not a lobbying group. They track bills. This is why I'm suggesting this contract should be canceled. I quickly found two websites that track these same exact bills. Two of them. One of them is the State of Oklahoma site. Both are very comprehensive and offered the title of the bill, summary, the date, and actually an index to search among others. The contract costs us $60,000 a year. I don't think that was ever brought up when we were talking about it. Nobody said $60,000, which is a lot of money. So 60 grand, And we have a state senator that's often here and a representative who is at most of our meetings. Why don't you ask them? They're actually in the legislature. They aren't monitoring from afar, they're actually in there before they make the bills. And this costs us, the city of Shawnee residents, nothing. So, appreciate your time. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Next up, we have Mrs. Sandy Gaeta.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor, I've already talked to you before. Now you see me in the flesh. I took time off from work. This is the part that was damaged on my car. Now, my front bumper was already damaged, but it was still intact. This goes to the front, over the front tire and around. When I got to work, it was hanging in front of my tire. Now, I have to drive to the Grand to go to work. Had it come off doing 70 miles an hour, it would have not only done damage to my car, it could have caused a wreck and those behind me. My issue is the homeless people being allowed to stay at the rescue mission 24/7. You have a health issue because they're pissing outside. They're also having to have to do defecation when the mission is done or closed because there's nowhere else to go. They've been on my property. I've got fingerprints on my car, on my door, where someone has tried to break in. I've had confrontations with them. I no longer will call the police because the police have told me there's a standing order. In that standing order, and if they're not doing a disturbance, they won't do nothing. They won't contact the people who are running it. They won't contact the people who own the building. However, there's damage done to my car, but that's not a disturbance. There's fingerprints on my car, but that's not considered a disturbance. I called the police on my way here because now there's a tent up again. They're sleeping in the kennels. I was warned that none of you will respond, but you are doing something, and I do appreciate that. And I do thank you again because when I contacted you before, you got something done immediately because they were gone for 2 weeks. It's not fair to us. I live there. My neighbors live there. I've got a neighbor who's got a 3-year-old autistic son. And the only thing that's saving her and her son from them barging into her house is she's got 3 Great Danes. The neighbor that lives across from that mission has 6 kids. They wake up every day with needles and trash in their yard. And they've got a pit bull, or pit dog, that is on a chain. I've got another neighbor who's got small kids, and there's been pedophiles at that mission. And he's got little girls and little boys. I've got a new neighbor that when it rained so bad the first time this year, they were stuck in her cellar. This isn't fair to us. Now, everyone says Christianity and helping the homeless. Well, there's also a saying, God helps them who helps themselves. We're not wealthy people. We're hard-working people. We're trying to renovate and bring back families to our neighborhoods. That's all I have to say. I know you're trying, and I appreciate it, but it would be a godsend if you would shut them down.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Rob Morris.
Good evening. I gave the orange writing paper. As y'all can see, this is Stewart and Clover's contract. The very first thing when you look through it that you'll notice is there's a red line through some writing. There's no signature on the back. This is the official copy when you ask for it from the city of Shawnee. That should say a lot right there. Next, let's go into the contract. The first one you'll see is the hourly rates, and then at the bottom of that paragraph it says in 1/10 of an hour increments it'll be billed. That'll come back into play here in a minute. The billing statement, sent monthly, itemized to reflect the service performed and/or costs and expenses incurred. Fourth paragraph, I'm sorry. This contract shall automatically renew for a term of 1 year unless terminated by either party. Okay, so a couple things. Number one, on the automatic renewal. We've been told over and over and over again by every city manager we have that contracts have to be renewed every year. You can do a 5-year contract, but it has to be renewed yearly. So why are they special that they just get it auto-renewed unless one of y'all bring it up? whereas everybody else that has a contract, it has to be renewed every year. Now let's go to the billing statement, the very last sheet that I gave you. That is the billing statement for the dates that I asked. Okay? The first date that I have, 9/19/2023, it's a couple days after I made a second inquiry just to try and get this information, and it was typed up that day. Because this is obviously not the itemized reports that tells me how they spent all of our money on the contract. Now, when you take the $200, $225, $250, and $100 an hour, even a tenth of an hour is $22.50. So you could have 50 cents or $1 increments in everything. Yet, when you look at what we've paid them, it's mathematically impossible to get those numbers without knowing how many subpoenas did we pay for, how many, what's the people that go out and they knock on your door and throw it through the window at you? The servers, process server. Couldn't think of the word. So I'd like next month for this to be brought up on an agenda item to be discussed, since apparently it never has. Now next, and this is a positive thing, for the new interim city manager, I hope we make an investment in the new interim city manager for the future. I hope we finally invest in someone in this town. He's from here, he's been around here forever, worked for the fire department. Now I will say, there is one issue of not living in Shawnee. And I think there's a way around that. Churches do it a lot. The city of Shawnee could buy a house. I would suggest 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That way it would survive a family. You're not going to stick a whole family in a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. That's kind of dumb. And then now, from now on, the city of Shawnee, in the future, when we do have to go down the road for another city manager, it's a lot easier to get one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Then now we have Ms. Denota Martin.
Good evening, Commissioners. I noticed the kayak launch is on the agenda. I just wanted to offer that I'm also a resource of history. There's about 4 or 5 of us that have been here since the beginning. I'm one of them. So if there's any questions, happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay. That concludes that part. On to item number 2, consider approval of consent agenda. And we have a motion.
Move to approve.
A motion from Daniel,
I'll second.
second from Mark. Item carries 6-0. Item number 3, presentation of the pet of the month by Animal Control. And there he is.
How are you guys?
Hello.
So this is Mowgli, and since it's St. Patrick's Day, his official name is Mowgli McPherson. So we had an adoption event today, and we did a shenanigans day. So we got 2 dogs adopted. So we had Jethro, what did we call him?
O'Reilly.
And then we had Lewis.
O'Connor.
So we did an adoption event today. We got 2 adopted. We did a microchip event. We had 15 microchips go out. With those 2 adoptions, we gave free microchips with lifetime registration for those guys.
Nice.
So we're trying to get our kennels emptied.
All right.
So little Mowgli here, he's about 10 months old. He's some kind of little terrier. He's not going to get any bigger. He was just neutered, so we have to watch him because he does want to lick. So I had to take the cone off of him, and he don't like that either.
I bet.
But he's very friendly with other dogs. He loves everybody. Just wants a home. His adoption fee is $10, and he is already neutered and current on his rabies shot. So Beverly does have some announcements for our shelter.
I'm a volunteer with the shelter, and we've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. The volunteer's going to be at Touch a Truck, so that will be great. I hope everybody comes out and sees us. And there's also going to be some other events that we're going to start doing. So you're going to see us out and about more. than we have been in the past. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope everybody comes and joins us. And someone really needs to adopt this miniature Irish wolfhound. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, guys.
Have a good day.
You too.
Cute. Oh, he's so cute.
Item number 4, Shawnee Ford presentation. We'll call him Crystal Romanishin from Shawnee Ford.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Pleased to be here with you tonight. This is a year-over-year analysis. If you recall, for those of you who were here a year ago, we established some benchmarks to measure against 10 other cities of comparable size. And is there a, I never know how to use this one. So I'm happy to report that we used the same data source, Jobs EQ, to pull the same information so that we could start tracking our successes and also measure the things that we need to be doing a little better and keep our eye on. So basically, it's a report of just the analysis of all of those demographics, and we're looking at some key indicators such as population, median household income, and crime rate, et cetera, so that we can effectively decide on the future together for our economic growth and put a plan together that works for this community. There we go. First, population. We had slight population growth, only about 0.5%, which over time is about normal. There are some communities in Oklahoma that are growing at a slightly larger rate, but nothing that really indicates one issue or another that we need to really be concerned about. Yukon, Enid, and Stillwater all had larger growth, but we're only talking a few hundred people. And so when you look at that percentage, not a large amount. Our labor force. Now, our labor force declined slightly in the last year, and so what we want to look at in the coming year is some of those challenges and why that labor force is declining and why it's declining at a faster rate than the other cities that we're measuring against. The other cities had an increase, in fact, with the exception of Durant, but they had a significant change at one of their larger manufacturers over this past year. In education, we're happy to report that we have a higher number of people with bachelor's degrees or higher. Let's see if I can get to the right one for you. I will continue. So we hope that that is because we are able to retain more students from our educational institutions once they finish their education. Over the next year, we are working very hard towards talent retention, both with OBU, Gordon Cooper, to make sure that those students at those institutions have jobs in our community. We've also instilled that Pathways to Professions program that we can work all the way back in elementary school to make sure that children in our educational institutions know that they have career paths that are available right here in our community. Our median house value has gone up from 121 to 141. Now, while that isn't as quite large of an increase as some of our other communities, it is about average for our state. You know? I'm not sure why this is. Okay, our poverty rate. So unfortunately, our poverty rate has risen. Last year it was 18.5, where this year it has increased to 20.2. It's higher than some of our neighbors in this state, so it's something that we wanted to make sure that we're aware of, and we dig deeper into some of those reasons why. Is it because our labor participation rate has declined? Is it because people are having more challenges getting to the jobs that they have? So that is one of the things that's on our radar to make sure that we're aware of and keep tracking and keep an eye on diligently. Our unemployment rate has also gone up, which naturally makes you think that would relate to the poverty rate that we have in our community rising as well. So again, we're trying to make sure we understand some of the barriers that people are experiencing, finding work and also finding how they get to work. Some of the things in this community that we're paying particular attention to as a community is housing, childcare, transportation. All of those things are some of the deeper barriers that are causing people to either not be able to participate in the workforce or are having inconsistent participation rates. Now, some good news. Our annual individual wage has risen this past year. Last year it was $41,881. For this year it is $44,914. We are happy about that, but we are still lagging behind some of our other communities. So one of our focuses is making sure the jobs we're attracting are those that are quality jobs and that raise the median income in our community. I'm not sure if this is following along with me, but I'll keep going. Our crime rate went down this past year as it did through a lot of other communities. However, we still are above the national average. Our law enforcement folks do a wonderful job, and we're pleased with the progress that we've had in this community and one that we hope continues. So while essentially this report is a mix of some good things and some bad things and some just neutral that I think we could make some progress on in the next year, I know that we're focused on as an organization and as a community through some of the folks that we align with. We're focused on talent attraction, talent retention, workforce development, housing affordability, and economic development as a whole, and what those pieces and parts are, some of those initiatives. All of that is to say that, let's see, I think that might be it for this. There were some other slides, but there were things that have happened in the past month. This past month, a couple of weeks ago, we had our 3rd annual Economic Development Summit. It was a wonderful day. We had about 130 community members who spent the day with us, hearing all about our theme, We Build Together. We had a great sessions that all sort of blended with each other and how we go from housing all the way to a panel of our OBU students hearing about what we can do as a community to retain them after graduation. And we've put some plans into action immediately, one being on April 7th. We're having an event called Shared Plates, Shared Futures. And this is something I would invite the entire community to participate in. We are asking business owners and community stakeholders if they would be willing to take anywhere from 2 to 5 students from OBU to dinner and just have conversation with them. One of the things that we heard from the panel is that they're really looking, one of the things that would get them to stay in our community is to feel connected. And so this is an opportunity not to form mentorships or offer internships or apprenticeships, just have a conversation with them and let them know that we appreciate them being here in our community and hope that they stay after. And maybe that will progress into something else, but I think it will be great when the whole community can go out on one night and we know that there are students and there are business and community stakeholders all out in our community celebrating each other. So if you're able to join us and willing to do that, please reach out to us at Shawnee Forward so that we can get you registered. Anyone else in the audience, we would also appreciate everyone's participation, or as many people as possible. And before I step down, I just wanted to recognize Leadership Shawnee, Class 38, if you would stand, please. These are the folks, as you know, who every year join us to learn more about our community and to find paths that they can engage in. So appreciate you all being here tonight. And there are, I guess you only have maybe 4, I think they're about 3/4 of the way through their program. So they've really gotten immersed in our community about every 3 weeks. And they just had education last week. So thank them for being here, and I appreciate your time.
Good job, guys. Item number 5, presentation of update and final report on Shawnee Twin Lake number 1 dam. Seth Barkheimer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm excited to get this in front of you. As you know, we've been working on this for quite some time. Got some pretty significant staff time. As Ryan pulls up the presentation here, I'm going to introduce Mr. Colin Young. Colin is a dams and levee engineer with Freese and Nichols. He's going to talk to us about the final engineering report on Lake number 1. F&I and Colin have done an incredible job for us, and really as we've gone on in this project more and more, I've realized that the In the dam expertise world, there's really a small niche, and a lot of the expertise in the state's really consolidated in only a couple of people, and I'm glad that Colin and his team were on our corner for the report. The report itself, as you see in your agenda packet, is a pretty comprehensive, long document. So he's going to summarize it into a couple of different slides. Feel free to ask questions, and with that, I'll turn it over to Colin.
Thank you, Seth. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to discuss our project with you. Looks like I didn't know if I was going to be able to see the screen from here or not, so I brought it on the laptop. It looks like I'll be good. Close that up. I apologize for the date on this slide. We originally going to do this with Seth on the 18th, and we got pushed back in this meeting, so I apologize for that on there. And this report has been reviewed, comments provided by OWRB, Oklahoma Water Resources Board, and the Corps of Engineers, Tulsa District, Dam Safety Production Center. And to kind of summarize our comments, they essentially agreed with all of our conclusions, findings. They had a few minor comments here and there, but nothing material that changes the report or the conclusions. So our scope basically consisted of these 6 major bullets: independent site inspection. We put boots on the ground, looked over all the components of the dam with our team. I have a couple of my colleagues here today with me. And there was about 6 of us that went out there for that day. Topographic surveys. The city had quite a bit of survey information already existing on the dam, but there were some data gaps, and so we just hired a consultant, CEC, to come out and survey and fill those data gaps, so we had a comprehensive survey of the dam. Do independent geotechnical analysis, so independent from what the firm Terracon had done previously. We didn't do any additional investigation when we poked holes in the ground. We just looked at their raw data and just used their raw data and formulated our own engineering analysis from that data. We reevaluated the spillway capacity, so that's how much water the spillway can pass without the dam overtopping. That's a state requirement. It wasn't necessarily part of the project related to previous geotechnical work that was done or even a subject of the consent order. It's just good engineering practice to make sure your spillway is up to date for capacity when you're doing other engineering work, because if it's not, the next time you go to do a major upgrade or repair, you have to make it in compliance with current standards. So we wanted to do that because the only time it's been done on this dam is 1978, which is a Phase 1 Corps of Engineer inspection that was done around all the high hazard dams all around the U.S. Back in the 70s. So we wanted to do an updated analysis there. We did a peer review of the Terracon 2023 report, and then we concluded the report with recommendations for either future studies or construction projects for defects or deficiencies. So these are just some pictures showing us walking around different components of the dam doing our site inspection. Visual assessment. So we break the dam. Any dam engineer that does an inspection of a dam, you kind of break it into different major components of the dam. So this is the crest. That's the top of the dam. In your case, you have a paved road across the top. A lot of dams don't have a public road across the top. Yours does. What I wanted to point out here was that in the bottom left is a picture that we took during the project. So this would have been July of last year. You kind of see some fresh pavement patch there. That was the area that was the subject of that kind of promulgated the studies, the additional studies by Terracon, and also the consent order. And on the right is a picture and a statement from that 1978 Phase 1 Corps of Engineer report, just to point out that similar type of phenomenon had happened previously and been noted by dam safety experts, or at least dating back to the 70s, just pavement failure due to heavy traffic loads. Not an issue with the dam itself. So in terms of qualifying the condition of the dam, the state adopted FEMA descriptors: satisfactory, fair, poor, and unsatisfactory. And there are specific definitions for each of those terms. The best is satisfactory. And so we classified the crest as in satisfactory condition. Upstream slope we categorized as fair. There is some over steepening of that slope. And that was actually an original construction feature. It was designed and constructed to be a little over steepened than what we normally like to see on dams. And that's really what has caused some of the sloughing down toward the water line from the riprap. So there's some of that localized sloughing. There's mismatched riprap because it's been repaired, kind of Band-Aid fixes over time. So there's broken concrete here, big rocks here, little rocks there. It's kind of mismatched. It's not a nice uniform coverage. And what that does is it prevents the embankment from eroding due to wave action. So if the stone were not on there and you get direct winds from the west, going west to east, it could beat up the embankment pretty fast and erode through the embankment and eventually could eat it into the crest of the dam. And eventually, if it really progressed, it cause a dam failure. We didn't see any immediate dam safety concerns. There is a project recommendation here to kind of fix the nature of that slope, the slope angle itself, and do new riprap. We'll talk about that. I think it's one of my last slides. Downstream slope, again, fair condition. There are some trees. If you've been out to the dam, there's a main slope coming off the dam, coming off the pavement. And you can see that when you're driving. Look over, it's very well mowed and maintained. There's a horizontal bench, and then there's a lower slope that goes down to where the water pond's there, and it's standing water during wet times of the year. That lower slope is heavily treed, and it's just grown that way over years. And that's not a good thing for a dam because it does a couple of things. It prevents you from getting a good close visual inspection to see if anything is really wrong. And there can be cases where trees can blow over in storms. The root ball gets uprooted and it can cause dam safety issues. And OWRB requires no trees to be on the dam, or they prohibit trees from being on the dam and within 30 feet of the edges of the structure. So you're kind of out of compliance with that requirement. There is some seepage in the groin. So the groin is just where the dam ends on the sides. There's some seepage on both sides there. It's nothing concerning. It's very, very common, but we did note that. And again, no immediate dam safety concerns with the downstream slope. The concrete spillway, it's really just an old concrete structure. It's weathered. It's been through a beating. It's exposed to the sun all day, every day, weather events, and then occasional spillway flows. It's performing as designed, as it intended, but it is older concrete. Has had some spot repairs here and there. There's some cosmetic repairs that could be done, but nothing structural that we could see. And again, we gave this a fair condition, really just due to the age of the structure. Okay, so our independent analysis, like I said at the beginning, we used the raw data from other previous consultants' reports. We did our own independent analysis. You meet all of the required OWRP slope stability factors of safety that are required to be met. Meets all the industry standards for seepage stability. And then we did make a recommendation that if you were to go further in the project, there's no compelling reason to, but any further analysis, you could do some more seismic analysis for earthquake loading. It's kind of protocol for Corps of Engineer dams. This is not a Corps of Engineer regulated dam. It's a state regulated dam, so it's not required by the state. But just because we're in a dam safety business, we did make that recommendation as a possible future study. This table's got a lot of geeky engineering stuff in it. You don't need to worry about the exact nomenclature of the numbers, but green is good. So all the far right are the actual factors of safety that we calculated for different load cases that we're required to analyze. The next column to the left are the requirements from the state. So you can see we meet all the required factors of safety there. Spillway capacity, you're required to pass as a grandfathered dam, grandfathered being built, constructed before 1973. The Water Resources Board has a clause for grandfathering spillways for older dams. You fall into that category, so you're only required to pass 50% of the probable maximum flood. If you guys don't know what that means, don't feel bad. Most people that aren't dam engineers don't know what that means. That equates to about a 17.5-inch rain in a 24-hour period. So it's a lot of rain. The full 100% PMF, which would be if this were a brand new dam being built, it would be required to pass 75%. If it was a little bit bigger into the higher size classification, it would be required to pass a full PMF without overtopping, and that is 35 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. That's a substantial event. Okay.
Those are just state requirements. Your spillway does meet that, passes 65%, required to pass, or required to pass 50. In 78, the Corps determined it was 81%. You're still passing 65, which is well above the requirements. If you did have to at some point eventually replace the spillway, you would have to come into compliance with the modern dam criteria, which would be 75% of that PMF, which is 26 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. So the spillway would probably have to be enlarged if it ever had to be replaced. That's just a pictorial because we had to have some kind of pretty graphic in here. That's just kind of the hydrology that went into that spillway capacity study. So the peer review of previous consultants' reports, our conclusions that we had were consistent with the Corps of Engineers' independent analysis of that same report. The initiator for all those studies, again, as I mentioned, was that pavement failure on the right side as you're going toward the spillway. The methods of drilling that were used for the previous studies were not consistent with accepted drilling practices in water retention dams. And those methods can alter or lower your strength parameters that you're actually analyzing and using to do your analysis. So those studies resulted in very low strength properties for the soil material itself, which resulted in lower factors of safety in those previous reports. And then the modeling, one of the main takeaways was the modeling results and the conclusions from those previous reports didn't jive with historical performance of the dam. The dam's been in service since 1936. There's never been a reported or known slope stability or dam safety issue. Okay, so recommendations. We recommend updating the dam's breach model. The main reason to do that is so that you have good, accurate maps for your emergency action plan. The study that was done in 2011 used a one-dimensional modeling technique. Current standards is a two-dimensional modeling technique, and what that gives you is not just areas that are covered in water, but now we can actually tell you by how much and what the velocity is, because there's a correlation between depth of velocity and actually danger to lives and infrastructure. You can't tell that with your current mapping that you have. So we do recommend that. And then as far as dam repair projects for deficiencies, repairing the upstream or replacing the upstream riprap, clearing the trees and vegetation on the downstream slope. And there's a little bit of scour protection that's needed in the spillway, very minor project. And we have the kind of a conceptual cost for those projects here summarized on this slide. I think that's my last substantive slide. Any questions? Happy to talk about dam stuff. Fire away.
Do we know why the original report was such a concern? And where you said you based all the information, your information that you just gave us from that, do we know why that was such a concern? Where did that come from?
Why the report was a concern?
Was it the report where did the concern come from, I guess?
Gotcha. It was an annual dam inspection, observations made in a annual dam inspection done by others.
Okay.
And then OWRB, so that pavement distress, that pavement failure that I showed you,
Right.
that was, in our opinion, erroneously classified as a slope failure.
Okay.
If that really were a slope failure, that would be alarming to dam safety officials with the state.
Right.
So they took that and ran with that.
Okay.
And then the additional studies came out of that.
Got it. Okay.
So it started with the dam inspection.
Okay.
That fair assessment, so.
Talk a little bit, John, about the factors of safety and being below one report as it being kind of a giveaway.
Right. So, not to get down to engineering speak with geotechnical engineering, but just think about maybe back when you were in college, took physics, the sliding block analysis. Anybody ever do that in school, or either in high school or college, where you have a sliding block and you put weight on it? When you get to a certain weight, it makes it slide downhill. So there's resisting forces and driving forces. And your resisting force against that block sliding down is the friction and the weight added to it. When the resisting forces equal the driving forces, it's just gravity. It's all gravitational, statics. The block moves. Well, the similar thing happens in slope stability and geotechnical engineering, but we have kind of curved failure surfaces. It's not just a flat plane, but it's the same concept. Resisting forces, driving forces. When they equal 1, that means the block is moving. The slice of soil, it would be slumping and moving. And so some of those were reported in previous studies of less than 1. Well, that really can't be, mathematically you could show that to be true, but in life and reality, that's not going to happen, or the thing, whatever you're analyzing would already be moving or would have already moved. So that's kind of a tell right there. Something was off with the inputs, if you will, that went into that analysis. What you're looking for? Anything else?
I guess in summary, we're in pretty good shape.
I think you're in pretty good shape.
That sounds wonderful.
Okay.
It's a relief.
Thanks for the time.
It's a relief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 6, consideration of a resolution updating the city fee schedule by 1, setting the water rates for residential and commercial use, both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections A and B, Section 2626, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the City Code. And 2, setting the sanitary sewer rates for residential and commercial use, both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections B and C, Section 2627, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the Code of the City of Shawnee. And Ms. Lisa Lacioni for staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. By resolution, the city conducts an annual review of its water and sewer rates and considers adjustments for the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, for both residential and commercial accounts. City staff has reviewed the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI for the following categories through December of 2024. We look at water and sewer maintenance, motor fuel, new trucks, motor vehicles, parts, and equipment, which includes tires, motor oil, coolant and fluids, and motor vehicle maintenance and repair. The overall CPI for all products from January 1, 2024 through December 31, 2024 was 2.9%. Due to the cost incurred for all items that support related maintenance activities, staff is requesting the consideration of a 2.9% increase for water and sewer rates. The proposed increase would change the minimum bill from $74.43, this is for a large polycart, to $76.52, which is a difference of $2.09. This does include the proposed rate increase on the next item for sanitation. A minimum bill for a small polycart would go from $69.44 to $71.35, which is a $1.91 difference. Staff requests approval of this item with an effective date of July 1, 2025, and with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay. Can we get a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Matthews,
I'll second.
second Commissioner C. Horn. Calling the city attorney to read the resolution title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution updating the city fee schedule by 1, setting the water rates for residential and commercial use both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections A and B, Section 26-26, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the City Code, and 2, setting the sanitary sewer rates for residential and commercial use both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections B and C, Section 26-27, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the Code of the City of Shawnee.
Okay. Now we'll vote on the item. And item carries 6-0. On to item number 7, consideration of a resolution updating the city fee schedule by setting the monthly rates and fees for solid waste services pursuant to subsections A, Section 23-38, Article 2, Chapter 23 of the City Code, and providing for the readoption of the city fee schedule in whole. Lisa again.
Hi again. The city entered into a contract with Central Disposal on July 1, 2020. The request for production provides for review of the CPI annually, and it is not to exceed 3.5%. Central Disposal sent a letter advising they would exercise their right to the CPI clause at the rate of 3.5%. I think it's important to know that the garbage trash collection CPI for 2024 is 4.3, but thankfully we're capped. If approved, the monthly rates would go from a small poly cart, which is $19.19 a month, to $19.86 a month, which is a difference of 67 cents. A large poly cart would go from $24.18 a month to $25.03, which is a difference of 85 cents. And an additional poly cart would go from $12.12 to $12.63, which is a 43-cent difference. Staff requests approval of this item with an effective date of July 1, 2025. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Can we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Sehorn? I'll second. Call on city attorney to read the resolution title, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution updating the city fee schedule by setting the monthly rates and fees for solid waste services pursuant to subsection A, section 23-38, Article 2, Chapter 23 of the City Code, and providing for the readoption of the city fee schedule in whole.
Now we'll vote. Item carries 6-0. On number 8, consideration to enter into a permit in lieu of franchise with Coxcom LLC for placing equipment in the rights-of-way of the city of Shawnee in order to provide services to Shawnee Public Schools. Call on City Attorney Joe Varnderen for a staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. This item comes before you at the request of Coxcom LLC, who is receiving assignment of the contracts and infrastructure that had previously been franchised by a prior commission. This is to provide fiber to certain Shawnee Public School facilities. Just a little bit of background, this agreement's been in place for about 7 years with the predecessor to Coxcom, which is owned by Cox Communications. They originally reached out to the city asking us to assign, consent to the assignment of the contract to Cox. Upon investigation, we realized that the contract had actually terminated. We did verify, just for the commission's edification, that all fees had been paid on time and appropriately. And so at this point, it's not an assignment, it's actually a new contract. These agreements we've reached with 2 other fiber optic providers within the city that are operating. And so we just offer the same deal to everybody, essentially. So that's what it is. It's an existing deal and infrastructure. There'll be no new infrastructure construction, just maintenance of an existing system that's been assigned to Cox Communications.
Okay.
And again, the terms of this agreement are the identical terms of the existing agreements with competitors. We switched that to where everybody gets the same deal a couple of years ago with one of these.
Okay. Any questions on any of this for Joe? Okay. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Matthews, second by Commissioner Madsen. And item carries 6-0. Item number 9, public hearing regarding a request to rezone a parcel of land from TA Transitional Agriculture District to C2 Regional Commercial District located at 1474 East 45th Street, Shawnee, Oklahoma. Case number RZ01-25, applicant Tracy Wynn, Atlantis Engineering. And we're calling Ryan Harkins for staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, as noted, this is a request to rezone property from its current designation of transitional ag to the C2 zoning district, that is the regional commercial under the Unified Development Code. The applicant is looking, as we note in the staff report, to start a nail salon at the address in question. The applicant and their engineer filed subsequent paperwork, and due notice was posted in the newspaper to surrounding property owners as well as appropriate signage. When staff did the review and looked at the request in depth, we felt based on the land use classifications, particularly in the future land use map, that the C2 was not a conforming or a appropriate zoning district in conformance with the future land use element of the comp plan, but that C1, because it's a little bit more neighborhood and local oriented commercial, was a more appropriate zoning district. The applicant's engineer and the applicant have no qualms about the C1 designation. It is a permitted use in both zoning districts, and we included a comparison table for both zoning districts with the staff report as an attachment for reference as well. Public hearing and recommendation from the Planning Commission is, after their public hearing, was to recommend C1. A number of people that did attend the public hearing, one person spoke up against the C2 but was in favor of the C1 because they felt it was an appropriate zoning classification at the present time as well. Having said that, staff's recommendation would be to conduct the public hearing and then take appropriate action at the right time on the ordinance. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ryan on the nail salon? Okay. Now we'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here to speak for this request. Okay, is there anybody here to speak against it? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And no more discussion, I guess, and then we'll move on to item 10. Consideration of an ordinance to rezone property at 1474 East 45th Street, Shawnee, Oklahoma, from TA Transitional Agriculture District to C2 Regional Commercial District. Case number RZ01-25, applicant Tracy Wynn, Land Use Engineering. And we'll call back Ryan up to the staff report.
So having conducted the public hearing, your options are to accept staff and Planning Commission's recommendation to rezone to C1. You can rezone per the applicant's original request to C2, which is what the draft ordinance there is per procedure. You can defer, or you can to a date certain if you think there's more information or discussion needed, or you can deny the request altogether as far as options. Any questions I can answer?
Any questions on this?
I have a couple. Have we identified, I've been a stickler on this in the past, but it's not the land use recommended in our plan, and our practice has been we had to identify exchange land, like land that we would exchange if we were going to go outside of the proposed land use map. Have we done that on this?
We have not done that in this case. Specifically in the past, that's been done when the land use classifications need to change drastically. Okay. And we're trying to swap an area for area type of basis.
Then are they wanting to use the existing structure on the, or are we talking new
They have
construction?
not indicated that.
Okay. Because I'm just looking at the parking requirements, because it's a big piece of property that would require.
They would have ample space to do that using the existing structure if they choose to, but they haven't indicated what their plans are with that at this time.
Okay.
So that would be something they would come in, if they were doing changes to the structure or in any way, they would come in and get a building permit process, and we'd go through that review at that point in time.
And my last question, do we have another place in town, thinking land use map, and where it's commercial, like basically one lot of commercial surrounded by R1?
There might be. We haven't looked specifically. We recommended C1 in part because C1 is appropriate as across the street immediately to the south. Whereas C2 in this case, if you were to approve that designation, would be a case of spot zoning in the midst of TA and R1 and C1.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Can we get a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, get a motion from Commissioner Mattson.
Oh, to approve the
pursuant to staff
The rezone.
recommendation.
Yes, thank you.
C1.
Yes, pursuant, thank you, sorry.
I'll second. Motion and a second. I'll call on city attorney to read the ordinance title, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance concerning the zoning classification of the following described property located within the corporate limits of the city of Shawnee, Potawatomi County, Oklahoma, to wit, beginning at the southeast corner of the southwest quarter of section 32, township 11 north, range 4 east of the Indian Meridian, Potawatomi County, Oklahoma, according to the United States government survey thereof, thence south 89 degrees, 28 minutes, 21 seconds west, a distance of 200 feet, thence north 0 degrees, 34 34 minutes, 34 seconds east, a distance of 625.4 feet. Thence north 89 degrees, 28 minutes, 21 seconds east, a distance of 200 feet. Then south 0 degrees, 34 minutes, 34 seconds west, a distance of 625.4 feet to the point of beginning from zoning classification TA, Transitional Agricultural District, to C1, Local Commercial District, amending the official zoning map of the city of Shawnee accordingly.
Now we'll call the vote. Item carries 6-0. Now on to item number 11, consideration of a resolution declaring it to be a matter of public necessity to acquire certain easements for the purpose of construction and expansion improvements known as the proposed 45th Street widening Phase 1 project, describing said fee simple and easements, and authorizing the city manager and city attorney to acquire said easements by purchase or by way of eminent domain. We'll call on Seth Barkheimer for staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you just read, this resolution allows us to go down kind of two independent paths forward to try to acquire the necessary easement. Obviously, still able to negotiate with the landowner, but this also allows us to file legal action to begin the process of acquisition. It's worth noting that this is a process that the landowner's attorney has requested we go through, so it's not independent of them. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good. Okay. And can we get a motion on item 11?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay. And we'll call on the city attorney to read the resolution, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution declaring it to be a matter of public necessity to acquire certain easements for the purpose of construction and expansion improvements known as the proposed 45th Street widening Phase 1 project, describing said fee simple and easements, and authorizing the city manager and the city attorney to acquire said easements by purchase or by way of eminent domain.
Vote on the item. Item carries 6-0. Item number 12, consideration of a contract between OK End Homelessness and the City of Shawnee for the administration of a transitional housing program for Shawnee Urban Renewal Authority property located at 104 South Chapman, Units A and B, Shawnee, Oklahoma. We'll call on Ryan Harkins for staff report.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So this is a memorandum of understanding / contract that we bring to you tonight. The city has 3 units, 2 of which are before you on this item that we can use aside from one that's already under contract for a 4th unit total for transitional housing. They're owned through SHURA, our Urban Redevelopment Authority, and thus part of our CDBG program. It's important to note, however, that these are typically not something as far as we being a landlord and renter that we rent out to the general public or to individuals at risk. We basically contract out the administration of these units to various nonprofits, COCA as one example that we note in the staff report, to administer and essentially serve as the administrator of transitional housing for those who are at risk or have been unhoused. The idea being this is a step off the street, or a first step, an additional step on toward the ladder of being unhoused and getting back on their feet. OK End Homelessness is looking at these 2 units after a few months of discussion. These 2 units and one other one had been previously administered by Community Renewal As they were looking at different directions, they decided not to renew their contract with us, and so these units have been sitting vacant for the past almost year, as we've looked at some other opportunities to use them for this type of housing. We've had some discussions with churches or groups of churches. Each of them have looked at the possibilities and then decided for different reasons that they weren't ready or it wasn't a good time for them to do that. And we were okay with that. Okay and Homelessness would be essentially doing the tenant management on our behalf. We would do monthly reports from them and project type of meetings where we would keep in progress with them. They are and have been a participating member of the Homeless Roundtable for the last few months. So they are already part of the conglomerate of groups working to end this situation as far as additional housing options and getting people off the street. Anything as far as maintenance beyond a certain amount is where the community development block grant funds would come into play. Right now, we don't anticipate that happening. The idea being we try and be more proactive on the management side, and we let them be proactive on the case management side so that we prevent issues from happening. Having said that, I know a representative from OK and Homelessness is here tonight. We've been talking with them for months now about this. We do have one other unit available that we've been talking with a couple of other groups about, and we hope to have another one contract like this to you soon for that. This is set up very similar to what we do with COCA right now. They have one unit that they basically have on contract from us. The idea being, as they have people, again, at risk or that have been unhoused, this is a step in the right direction off the street. Having said that, I'd be happy to answer questions you might have.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
So what's the cost to the city?
Right now, there's no cost to us unless there's something maintenance-wise major that comes up. We don't anticipate that right now, but right now there is no cost to us.
But if there is a cost, would that come from the CDBG funds?
If we have to use funds, yes, we would draw from that first. Particularly, we could also draw from program income that we have in the CDBG program, which wouldn't necessarily take from our annual allotment. We do have some previous year's funds right now that we could use for some of that, so it wouldn't impact the ability to further do housing rehab or demo for people who can qualify. And we do a couple of rounds of promo each year for that anyway, but that's not something that I anticipate being impacted.
So this is transitional living. If they were homeless, they can apply to go to this home. And it is an application process. How are we venting
It's
that?
a screening process that clients who are already being case managed that are unhoused would go through OK and Homelessness to do, or COCA, so those groups would work together. Once they have a viable candidate, they would make sure they understand the rules and the procedures and the things they need to be doing. They would have a case plan that they would need to be working through, much like COCA does with their clients now. And if they're making progress, they continue to stay. If there's issues, then we try and work through them. If we can't work through them, then we try and move on to someone else.
And this is a normal area to put that? This location's a fine area for that?
These are scattered throughout the community. We feel like it's an easier way to get people in scattered site housing off the street in an appropriate situation where we can get them the opportunities to have the support that they need.
And they have to do what? Do they have to mow the lawn? Do they have to pay fees?
So they would be working to do, for example, if they don't have a job, find a job. If there's training or things like that, as part of their case plan, they would have to be making those progress, showing that progress to their case managers. And from there, if those things aren't being done, then it's a matter of remedial efforts. And then ultimately, if we need to look at replacing them with another tenant, we would do that.
I mean, I'm kind of with Greta. There's going to be maintenance fees for sure. If there's a plumbing fee, who's paying for that? I
Sure.
mean, things come
So
along with homeownership.
The first 2,500 typically under the contract, minor maintenance and issues like that, OK and Homelessness would take care of. After that is where we would come in and take care of maintenance issues. Lawn maintenance for sure on properties we already do through a separate contract anyway. So those types of things can be taken care of. If they feel like as part of the case plan, the client can actually do some of those things and wants to help just those are things that we can work in as we go.
These are homes we already own, yes?
Correct.
Okay, this is not a financial change of any sort. It's actually utilizing resources that we already have in place by allowing OK and Homelessness to be the quote landlord, for
Correct.
lack of a better term, on our behalf. But these are properties that we already own, correct? Is that correct? Okay. So we are
That
not.
community renewal gave us?
No.
or
No, we
owned
already
them
own
to begin
these.
with?
Community Renewal had been essentially the landlord for us and then decided that was not something they, as a task they wanted to take on anymore as part of their core functions.
Do you know how many of these homes we own as a city?
Coca is operating one right now, 2 are on this contract, and then there's one other one we're looking at bringing hopefully in the next month or 2 to you.
Okay.
Shura has, those are dwelling units. We have a few other properties that staff is looking at trying to move into the hands of nonprofits, or as we obtain properties through tax sale, declare liens, trying to put them back into production for, in some form or fashion, to do additional housing dwelling units in the community.
So Greta and Ashley asked about repairs and maintenance. What about utilities?
So utilities typically under these contracts are taken care of by the landlord who's administering this program. Well, right now what we have started to look at is the possibility under our next consolidated plan, if that's something we can do as part of it as well, just to help ease that burden. But again, that's one of multiple steps that could be done under the next consolidated plan to help utilize CDBG dollars further in order to help provide opportunities not only to do housing rehab, but also homeless assistance, transitional housing, and other things that address issues with low to moderate income households and slum and blight in the community.
And what is our exposure as far as liability on these, being the property owner?
Right now, is ultimately, as the property owner, most of the liability transfers onto the landlord for the agreement. However, if we feel like there are issues, then we have the ability to call the contract back and take the property back over. That's again part of that monthly management type of walkthrough that we would do.
Any other questions for Ryan? And can we get a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract.
Motion by Commissioner Mattson.
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. We'll take a vote on this. Motion carries 5-1. Go on to item number 13. Consider bids. We'll call on Seth for staff report.
Thanks, sir. As you said, this is the bid award for unit rate paving and drainage project. We opened bids on February 4th, 2025. At that bid opening, we had 4 bids. Since then, staff has reviewed the bids and all of the unit pricing. At this time, staff recommends awarding a primary vendor contract with Rudy Construction Company and a secondary vendor contract with CGC LLC. This dual contractor approach allows us more flexibility in pricing and in timing. Worth noting that the total value of both both companies' task orders issued under these contracts will not exceed $820,000. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
You guys have any questions on that one? Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Seth. Item 13 carries 6-0. Item number 14, acknowledge monthly sales tax and budget reports received in February and March 2025. Call on Kimberly Smith, Finance Director, please, for her staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. The sales tax report for February is totaled $2,764,752.71, which includes $4,456.99 in interest. This revenue is distributed across the 8 funds. The receipts in February are from estimated January sales and final sale figures in December. February 2025 collections had a 2.5% increase over February of last year. When comparing collections to the conservative budget projections for February, we are 0.93% below projections for the month and 0.83% above collections year to date. Use tax for February totaled $496,690.08, which is 2.69% increase projected collections for the month. When you combine the use tax and the general fund portion of the sales tax, the general fund is currently $43,025 below budget projections. Excuse me. Sales tax report for March. The sales tax for March totaled $2,392,117.76, which includes $3,499.41 in interest. This revenue is distributed across the 8 funds. The receipts in March are from the estimated February sales and final sales figures in January. March 2025 collections had a 5.05% increase over March of last year. When comparing collections to the conservative budget projections for March, we are 3.22% above projections for the month and 1.06% above collections year to date. Use tax for March totaled $264,188.93, which is 21.25% decrease projected collections for the month. When you combine the use tax and the general fund portions of the sales tax, the general fund is currently $76,958 below budget projections. Thank you.
Any questions for Kimberly? Okay, before we get to number 15, I've had a request for a 10-minute bathroom break. If we can do that, please. Ryan says we're good to go. So, time in. Item number 15, administrative report, overview and history of the adaptive kayak dock. Joe Varner and City Attorney for administrative report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. As this topic has come up over the last several commission meetings, I've had multiple commissioners reach out and ask for kind of an overview of how we got where we are. And so really what I wanted to touch on, I don't want to take a lot of time. I don't want to bore the commission with details that are not relevant to the current decisions, but I did want to provide some background as to how the city came to have the kayak dock, the donors that assisted in the city possessing the kayak dock, the role that the Lake Advisory Committee played in this process and in recommendations with regard to the kayak dock, and also the commission actions and exposure that the prior commissions have had with regard to decisions relating to the kayak dock. So with that, I'll jump right in. Kayak launch donors are listed on this slide. Total amount of $50,300.48. As you see, there are 7 donors of varying amounts. Several community partners, financial institutions, nonprofits. With that, that launch was purchased and ultimately was donated to the city. That process was a little bit cumbersome, but ultimately the launch itself was donated to the city and signed off on by each of those 7 donors. For those that aren't aware, I think most of you are, the prior commission formed the Lake Advisory Committee in the summer of 2021 to deal with a multitude of issues involving the Twin Lakes. That committee was comprised of a broad cross-section of individuals and interest and stakeholders within the community. But I think primary for purposes of the consideration of the kayak launch, there were members of the kayak club who frequently use the waters of Shawnee Twin Lakes to kayak. There were also lake residents on that committee, as well as other civic leaders throughout the community. That committee met 4 times, lengthy meetings 4 times between August 30th of 2021 and January the 10th, 2022, and then ultimately drafted and submitted to the commission specific recommendations relating to many issues, and those issues included the location of the kayak dock and then proposed commercial activity at the lake. So I do want to point out those specific recommendations that came from the Lake Advisory Committee. So on this slide, you'll see a section of that report that was submitted to the commission entitled Ramps, Docks, and Parking Areas. I've only pulled sub F because they did address each of the boat ramps, docks, fishing facilities at the lake with specific comments. But the specific comments with regard to the adaptive kayak launch, it came from the Lake Advisory Committee, and this again was submitted and presented to the commission in February of 22, was for the adaptive kayak launch to be removed and stored pending the completion of a lake study and reinstalled pursuant to recommendations thereof. Obviously, the commission is aware that it was not removed, but the commission is also aware that a lake study was performed and a lake master plan has been submitted to the commission that contains recommendations with regard to the location of the kayak launch. The next item that was addressed that I think is of relevance here was commercial development. And again, we see a recommendation to seek out and engage qualified professionals to conduct a lake study that will assess the current state of the asset and make recommendations regarding the strategic development and conservation of the lakes. It goes through several bullet points as to the considerations that the Lake Advisory Committee identified. Without going through each of those, I would say that it was seeking to strike a balance between wanting to have a robust and active recreation area with the fact that it is a primary water source and the conservation necessary to maintain such a resource. There was further recommendation, and I fear that we jammed too much into one slide, or I jammed too much into one slide. But there was also, in addition to deferring any sort of long-term commercial development, there was a recommendation for what was termed by the Lake Advisory Committee to be immediate common sense development. And boiling that down would be to identify certain areas that already exist in recreational areas and boat ramps, whereby permitted vendors could have short-term access to commercial activity, primarily focusing on pop-up shops, recreational equipment rentals, and food trucks. Now those would be seasonal and restricted by permit and application. So those are the recommendations with regard to that. Coming out of the Lake Advisory Committee, obviously a pretty significant recommendation with regard to the kayak launch itself in relation to the request for its removal. I do think it is worth noting that most of the recommendations of the Lake Advisory Committee were unanimous. And while the report itself was unanimous, members of the kayaking community that served on that committee did not agree with the removal of the adaptive kayak launch. But the report as a whole was approved by a majority of the committee, and that was the recommendation. So that did prompt discussion at the commission level. Perhaps Commissioner Seahorn was here at that time, I believe. Ultimately, as we've discussed, it was not removed, but it did initiate further discussion. And the item was essentially deferred for a couple of reasons. Number one, staff did move forward with a primary recommendation of the Lake Advisory Committee to commission a master plan or study of the lake. And as noted, that was completed. It was during the same time frame that the loose ends were tied up with regard to the donations, and the city formally accepted those. And then an administrative report was given at approximately the same time to address the location issue. Just for ease and to avoid any confusion, I haven't paraphrased or taken anything out. I'm actually going to show you slide by slide the report that the commission saw at that time, so that you guys are possessed with the same information that they had. So this is where that begins. And this report again was delivered in December of 2021 as an overview of kayak area improvements. At this point in time, preliminary recommendations that were ultimately presented as part of the Lake Advisory Committee report were circulating, and so this was presented to the commission to address some of those preliminary findings. As you see, information that's been provided, we have 7 private donors. Funds were raised to purchase the ADA accessible kayak ramp. But this is the point where discussion began about the additional investment necessary to complete the ADA compliant access, which is, December 21, we're addressing that problem, and you, as the current commission, have been asked to address that problem, which is why we brought this before you. So this is not a new issue, but certainly a difficult issue. So at this time, city management and staff presented 4 potential options, which you can see before you. First one being boat ramp number 1, second being Glen Collins, third one being number 2, Lake Park, which is where it currently sits, and the fourth one being boat ramp at number 2. Staff at that time presented each location, pros and cons. These are the same considerations before the commission today, unfortunately. But as we walk through that, not much has changed. Obviously, we did have an installation at Lake Park, Lake number 2, Lake Park, and so that has changed. But other than that, not much about the locations has changed. At that time, a commitment was made by the commission to complete the park regardless of where it was, right? Staff was instructed to go forward and to budget the appropriate money to complete the other ADA accessible requirements that were necessary. And again, depending on which location is ultimately chosen, those will vary slightly, but we will have to have ADA accessible parking areas, ADA accessible walkways to be able to access the kayak launch, things of that nature to complete the accessibility. So a financial pledge was made at that time, at least by instruction. Obviously, February of 22, the Lake Advisory Committee recommendation came through. And then beginning in March of 22, design bid build. Unfortunately, that did not occur as a result of the Lake Advisory Committee recommendation to defer until a lake master plan could be completed. So what other discussions have occurred? What other information has been provided to the public and to the commission? This slide kind of breaks that down. Obviously, we have a gap in time here for the reasons that I've stated, but in January of 24, the Shawnee Twin Lakes Master Plan was presented to the commission and includes discussion of the kayak launch, and I know that the commission's been able to access that if they so chose. And then June and December of 24, the 25 through 29 CIP were on the agenda for amendment and approval. The kayak area improvements were mentioned in each, which is what was brought ultimately before this commission, incorporating staff recommendations to leave the dock where it sits and to put the ADA improvements around that. Now, I want to be clear, that was to complete a project that the staff was instructed to undertake in December of 21, not because staff has a specific location in mind. They've laid out pros and cons. At that point, I know that there was not a majority of the commission that believed that going forward with that plan was appropriate at that time without more information and investigation. I understand that the commission is undertaking that investigation. We're providing this as part of that, so you have the information that prior commissions had with regard to who paid for the dock, what's left to do, where should it go, and ultimately, what is that cost to the city going to be? So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. I know that Seth and Mark are as well.
Any questions for Joe on the kayak dock report?
So we have a $50,000 dock, and what was presented to us was $344,000 additional investment for it to become adaptive, correct?
To meet full ADA compliance, from parking to accessing the launch.
And at this point, Seth, the best option is to go with,
I don't think that's for me to say, to be honest with you. I think that's for you guys to tell us.
the cheapest option is to go with.
The cheapest option would be to make it ADA compliant without the larger park. I mean, the $344,000 that you were looking at was a turnaround area, additional parking, a cul-de-sac for people to basically go in there and turn around and unload. It was kind of, I mean, it was not the bare bones design option. It was more of creating an amenity along with it. So the cheapest option would be make it ADA compliant, but that's for you guys.
So these docks are, if you don't have one, you don't really know how they work. So these docks are very similar to each other. So the dock that I have at my home is going to be in structure and design very similar to this dock. So it's a simple matter of, you can even reposition the dock to a different, so where the dock currently, the ADA kayak dock, is jutting out into the channel, which is in direct boat traffic, it should be repositionable at a minimal cost. And then we have options to make the access to that ADA compliant with handicap spots as well. But then because of the structure of that dock, you can also as they're saying, attach it to other docks that we have. I will say, and I don't know if anybody has been out to the lake, we did have some damage to some of our city docks from the weather. So I think it's minimal, I think it's repairable, but we're gonna have to work on at least one of our docks anyway. So this might be an opportunity to look at options as far as, is this a good, you know, if we're repairing anyway, then we can potentially attach this dock to another dock that we already have that has minimal investment to get it ADA compliant surrounding the area and accessing the dock.
So in the current location, what would be the price for the minimal ADA compliance approximately?
I mean, rough guess would be 60,000, 50,000, somewhere in that ballpark probably, just to do an ADA parking area, gourd area per ADA standards, and a sidewalk to the loading area from the existing parking area. Like I said, it doesn't create a drop off or kind of some of the other amenities that were included in the plan that was proposed as part of the CIP effort.
Right. Okay. Any other questions on the kayak?
Of course, that dock's been there 4 years.
For a little over 4, yeah.
Has anybody hit it?
So that question is asked often, and I guess I don't understand the relevance of that question. So whether or not someone has hit it, why take a chance on that? I mean, is that just, I guess I just don't understand the relevance of that question.
You're gonna have boats around it wherever it's at.
So we should leave it in their pathway?
Do what?
We should leave it in their pathway?
That's not in the direct path.
I have a picture, it absolutely is. It absolutely, if you look at the channel, it is directly, it blocks on path the exit from the channel.
When you start changing the angle of it, it's, you know, the way the dock is, or the walk is attached to it, you start affecting that too.
That's not gonna change anything. If anything, it would probably shorten the distance that we need to right to it.
I mean, you're not wrong. If we change the angle, we will have to tear out the existing concrete structure that's anchored to and reconnect it regardless of
What is the cost on that?
it's not.
It's minimal. It's nominal. It's
Yeah.
nominal.
So we went from 344,000 initially down to 60,000, is that correct?
That's bare essentially.
Those are two different things. That's apples and
I
oranges.
know, but to get the same item complete, to do the same
To be
thing,
in
to offer
compliance.
the same.
To check the compliance box, I think that's what you're saying. Yeah.
And we also
Big
have
difference.
a park, we also have a park that is in dire need of some repair, is that correct? Highest volume park?
Talking about out the lake.
No. In
That's
town.
really outside of the scope of this presentation.
But the funds can be used for anything, can they not? So they came from general fund, which can be reappropriated.
Sure, you guys
Yes.
may, I mean.
That's what I'm saying.
Currently, they're unappropriated because the CIP item wasn't passed.
That's
you
what,
guys
so
will
that's
have
what I'm
the
saying.
ability to-
So that's my, so if budgeted item, we don't spend the $345,000 or $46,000, whatever, we can assign it to, I mean, it came from general fund, it's not,
They are not restricted funds, and
Thank
this
you.
commission has
That's
the
what-
ability to reallocate.
That was what I was asking.
Just to
Thank
be
you.
clear, the CIP that was adopted was $260,000 for the
Right.
CIP.
Yes.
What was voted down was the amendment to raise that
correct,
to the 344.
but they are not restricted funds.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
To be completely transparent, because I believe in that, I'm looking at a $50,000 dock. I love kayaking. My kids like to kayak. I think it's great. But when you attach $344,000 onto it, I'm like, hang on just a minute. It has nothing to do with me being discriminatory of people with disabilities, which I was accused of. So we'll get that out there. I think it's great that we're going to have people with disabilities that are able to use the dock. So thank you for the options.
Any other questions?
I'm done. Okay. Okay, on item 16, any new business, Mr. City Manager?
No, sir, no new business.
Okay. And item 17, Commissioner comments. Start with Commissioner Matthews.
Sure. A couple things. I thought the dam report was great. I've always wanted to say it's a good dam report. But hopefully that alleviated some concerns. And sales tax I thought was interesting. It's solid. One thing I thought was interesting is neither the sales or the use tax are necessarily following past trends that we've seen, and they're not necessarily following other communities either. And so it's just something to keep our eye on, but appreciate the conservative budget, and hopefully the trends, we're able to kind of lock something in as we come into budget season. So appreciate staff and all they're doing.
Some of you may or may not know that my Friday was a bit of an adventure. We had massive fire out in my ward and surrounding my ward. And I just want to give my express thanks to all of the entities that came together to save as many homes and animals and people as possible. I cannot tell you how impressed I was with the teamwork. And when I say teamwork, I'm talking about Shawnee PD, I'm talking about Sheriff, I'm talking about Shawnee Fire Department, Bethel Fire Department, I believe some McLeod and Dale were there as well. There was a tribal fire department there. We had REACT, it was unreal. And due to that teamwork, the loss was minimal. We still had loss. It's tragic. I definitely was off my game a little bit tonight because I'm still, it's a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot to see. It was hard. So Stillwater suffered a lot worse than we did. They had a much bigger loss, so I think they're taking donations and things like that. A lot of people have reached out to me as far as the people that had lost in our ward. And as far as I know, I think Red Cross should be stepping in, is that right? Yeah, so hopefully they're gonna be helping with that. But Friday was a lot, but our guys did great. And the surrounding communities did great. It was, wow, just wow. So thank you to them.
I'd say also kudos to emergency responders, fire, the churches that have stepped up, all of the citizens of Shawnee that have stepped up. I believe they reported no deaths, which was amazing.
Yeah.
So nice work.
I kind of agree with everybody as far as the fire department and all the emergency management. Pretty amazing what they can do when they, put together as a team. I'm sure Mark was deep into this, being that's
Yeah,
his expertise. No doubt the dam report was kind of a sigh of relief, because the early indication on that was going to be a catastrophic cost to the city, which we couldn't afford. But, it kind of eases everybody's mind. Yeah, we need some maintenance, but, we're going to have to do that anyway. And then from the tax standpoint, I'm kind of like Daniel, is kind of interested to see the use tax go down like it has, and everything else kind of trail like it has been. So luckily we're conservative, and I really appreciate the reports. They're definitely make it easy on us. That's all I have.
You guys did a good enough job. I don't have anything to add. I agree.
Not gonna plug baseball?
No, I'm not shameless to plug anything. Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
No, I'd also like to thank our fire department, all of our first responders, and special thanks to City Manager Simpson. He kept me up to date. I was kind of hesitant to call because I know he was ears deep in it, but he took my call and he kept me up to date on everything, and give all those guys some really, great thanks and kudos. Another thing I wanted to address is we just raised your water bill this evening, or gave the go-ahead to do it. Nobody wants to do that. I hate it. I'm not going to speak for everybody else up here, but I didn't want to do it. But with that being said, when you call the utilities department and we call them to ask them questions and everything, I know we've been going through some growing pains with our processing company and everything else. Please be patient with them. I mean, they're just humans on the other end of the line, just like we are. And I would just hate to think that they're getting chewed out for something that we did as far as raising these rates. Like everything else in the world, everything keeps going up every year. I'm just thankful it's not as high as insurance rates are. You know, insurance rates have gone crazy. But I just wanted to give shout out to all the personnel and staff over in the utilities department, Lisa's folks, and see if we can just kind of be kind and cut them a break. And I think that's all I've got. You guys filled it up pretty good. And with that, we will adjourn and go to the Shawnee Airport Authority. Is it me again? It says I'm on here.
It shows we're both on there.
It doesn't show present and voting.
So do I gotta leave again and try it again? Yes, I'll leave, then I'll join. It kind of flashed and skipped.
Still shows join.
Leave again?
It shows yours not joined.
I didn't even get to this. I didn't have time.
I'm gonna try to leave again and see if it'll. It's kind of glitching right past the, okay.
Did it show me join?
I think I got it in there now. Okay.
We got a quorum. We're good, sir.
Yeah, we don't need you.
We're good, sir.
That's not. Eric, it's fine.
And we'll see if it works for you.
Okay.
For you.
I had to go out 3 or 4 times.
I think this is on purpose.
Okay.
Okay, okay. All right, item number 1, consider approval of consent agenda, minutes from the January 21st, 2025 regular meeting.
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And item passes 6-0. Any new business, Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir.
All right, and we will adjourn from the Airport Authority and go to the Shawnee Municipal Authority.
Oh, now it's doing it to me.
Oh, it was that one clicked on me.
Oh, no.
Oh,
It's doing the same thing.
Eric, you jinxed me. You gotta beat it.
I think you said we don't need you.
I know, you don't need me.
Don't
Carry
need
on.
you now.
You see that?
Yeah, it's not.
It's going right past it.
Yeah. Oh, is yours not working? Oh.
I think I've learned a new trick.
Uh-oh.
So if you all will just join.
Okay, I can't even remember if I'm joined.
Mayor Stevens and Commissioner Matson. I sure you two are not joined. Everybody else is.
Oh, it worked, I think, this time. Did it work?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We're ready.
Am I in there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, item number 1, consider, make sure I'm on the right page, yeah. Consider approval of consent agenda minutes from the January 21st, 2025 meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, we'll take a vote.
Commissioner Whitner and Commissioner Seahorn, did either one of you vote?
Nothing came in.
Okay. I'll take your verbal votes.
Yes.
Yes.
Item carries 6-0. Item number 2, consideration of renewing leases for various pieces of equipment to maintain city infrastructure from C&H Industrial Capital America LLC. I'm calling Brad Schmidt, Public Works Director, for staff report.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is a renewal of a lease that we originally entered on September 20th of 2021. This was our best way at the time to replace worn out equipment for excavation for roadways, water main, sewer main repairs. There's multiple pieces of equipment on this. We've had very good success with the initial program, and staff approves, staff recommends approval of the contract.
Okay.
I'll approve it if you'll let me.
Gives me a trauma response from whenever I did that.
Now, is this for option 1 or 2 on the 36 or 48 month?
It'd be option 1.
Option 1,
36
3 year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And your annual hourly usage maxes out at 600 hours?
Yes, sir.
Is that what, okay. You ever go past that?
No, sir.
Yeah, that's a lot of time on a machine.
Even through February of 21, we didn't have all the pieces in, but the ones that we did have, the bad ice storm with all the main breaks, we didn't exceed it.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for Brad on all the equipment? So the mayors get to test drive them or anything out in the yard, maybe?
He wants to say
A
no.
big open field.
The city manager.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Hey, don't ask, right?
Special insurance, birthday party situations, it's fine.
Touch a truck.
I'll sign a waiver.
Yeah.
Okay, can we get a motion? I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Brad.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Item carries 6-0. Item number 3, any new business, Mr. Manager?
No, sir.
Okay, item number 4 is adjournment. We are finished.